Alex Hormozi generates a new lead every 6 seconds and does over $250 million per year in revenue. And he's credited his YouTube content, and his hooks in particular, as a huge driver of that growth. Now, I've only generated about $5 million in revenue from YouTube, but I do have a ton of nerdy data science tools, and Alex's advice on hooks is kind of buried in multiple places. So in this video, I'm going to save you the trouble of finding it yourself, explain the exact formula Hormozi uses for his hooks, then we're going to look at the data and see if his formula actually works. And I'll give you a free tool that will instantly score your hooks against Hormozi so you can see how you stack up.
A hook is the combination of the topic, the headline, and the format that you display your message that increases the likelihood that someone will engage with your content. If someone does not want to engage with the hook, they will not read past that or listen or watch past that. All of your attention should be going towards the first impression. That is ultimately the biggest lever on how many people will ultimately consume your stuff.
So that's what it is generally and why it's so critical. How does this apply to YouTube specifically? Most people on YouTube would define the hook as the first 30 seconds at most of a video. I think Alex's broader definition of a hook here is actually better because he's calling out the topic and the headline, which on YouTube initially comes from your title and thumbnail.
For short form, honestly for long form too, and ads, like you guys just have to obsess about the first 5 seconds. In YouTube videos, maybe you can get away with the first 10, but for the most part, it's like, and so you want that to be airtight, no extra words, very clear, maps to the thumb, maps to the headline.
So the title and thumbnail, or the packaging, is the topic and the headline setup, and then the first few seconds of the video is what confirms and expands that topic and headline. So the formula he's outlined the most clearly is what we'll call the 3P formula, so proof, promise, and plan. But he bases the 3P formula off reviewing his best 35 educational videos.
And so I actually developed a new moniker around how to think about introductions for ourselves that I'm spreading throughout my whole team, and you can just steal it. Proof, promise, plan.
Proof, prove that you know what you're talking about. Promise, you got to tell them what they're going to get or learn from the video. And then plan, you have to set out the expectations for what will happen next. Let's break these down using his own content. So here's a perfect example of him hitting all three.
In 2016, I had $1,000 to my name, sleeping on a gym floor. 9 years later, I broke the Guinness World Record for the fastest selling nonfiction book and generated over $106 million in sales in a weekend.
So there's his proof. So by the 11-second mark, he's told you he's went from having $1,000 in his bank account to a $100 million book.
In this video, I'm going to show you how I'd build a business if I started all over.
There's the promise. So from the 11-second to the 14-second mark, he's saying, I'll show you how I would build a business if I started all over.
So first, either sell extremely expensive stuff to a select few.
And then by the 15 or 16-second mark, he's into the first lesson, and the on-screen visual is clearly showing you that there's going to be 4 lessons. He's already revealed the first. So that's your plan. So super compact, super concise, and he nails all 3 beats in about 16 seconds, which is really impressive. So this next one is a little different. See if you can spot which of the 3 Ps is actually missing here.
Poor people stay poor because they want a fast way to get rich. And instead, the richest people that I know pick one of these 4 paths, play it for a decade, and then end up with more money than everyone else that is just chasing shortcuts. And just a fun reminder for you, no president, no economy is gonna make you rich. You have to do that for yourself. So in this video, I'm gonna show you the 4 paths to mega money. And I'll show you how to pick the right path at the right time for you.
So the promise is how to pick the right path of the 4 paths to make mega money. That's pretty clear. The plan is he's outlined on the screen that there's 4 paths and he's gonna walk through them one by one. The proof is what seems absent here. Now, maybe you could argue that his richest people I know comment is his proof. But even if that is the proof, it's definitely less proof than the first example where he calls out going from $1,000 in his bank account to a $100 million book launch. And I think the interesting thing to note here is that proof is one of the ones that Hormozi hits the most. And yet even here in one of his examples, it's the one he drops. Now, this third example introduces an important element that I think is missing from the original 3P framework.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to learn anything very fast. And this is the exact process that I use to learn stuff. For the past 14 years in business, and more recently, I just broke the Guinness World Record for fastest selling nonfiction book, which generated $106 million in sales in less than 3 days. So if you see everyone who's moving ahead of you faster than you, and you hate that everyone's moving ahead faster than you might not be as smart as you think you are.
So the promise is pretty clear. It's learn anything very fast. The proof is the Guinness World Record once again, and it's also his first person proof of this is how I learn stuff really fast. So the interesting thing about this example is that he spends time addressing this idea of watching people move faster than you are and the idea that maybe you're not as smart as you think you are. And that's a pain, that's a problem, right, for the viewer, which is interesting because that's a missing element from the basic 3P formula. But it's not really missing. It just depends on where where you look. So he has a breakdown of VSLs, or video sales letters, and in that video he outlines the 5 Ps.
Structure 1 is actually very similar to a YouTube video. So you're going to go the 5 Ps, which is proof, promise, pain, plan, picture. Okay? So what does this mean? It means that I need to make some promise that they're going to get from this video. I need to talk about the pain to demonstrate that I know where they're at right now. I need to give them proof that why they should believe me. And then I'm going to lay out the plan of how I'm going to help them solve it. And then usually I want that to be a visual so they can understand, hence the visual.
And really, we've seen that already in the 3 examples. When he was outlining the plan for the video that had the visual of how many steps, that's the picture. When he talks about everyone racing ahead of you and hating that feeling, that's the pain. So the 3P is like his baseline for a hook. You need promise, proof, and plan, or just don't even bother. And then he has the extra 2 Ps of pain and picture. And they're in his content a lot. He's clearly hitting those quite a bit. And he outlines them explicitly for VSLs. Now, we do super nerdy data science stuff here, and I never like just taking someone's word for it. So I grabbed every single video that Hormozi has published on his main channel, about 557 long-form videos. And then we hand-labeled a huge set of videos from his channel and a bunch of other channels so that we have a human ground truth set. And we scored all those hooks across 4 Ps, just so to be super confusing. Proof, promise, pain, and plan. So why did we not score the 5th P, the picture? Because it's a lot harder, and this was hard enough already. So then once we have a ground truth set of human labeled data, we train a model on that data that takes a hook and returns a score across those 4 dimensions. So to give you a little peek at how that works, you can actually use this tool if you hit the link in the description. We'll talk more about this here later. But if I just drop a hook in here and we paste something in, it's gonna score it. So the hook was, in this video, I'll show you how I made $10 million last year. That comes out with a strong promise, because there's a pretty strong promise there. There's no pain, so pain is absent. Quite a bit of proof, right? Strong proof, because I'm saying I made $10 million last year. And we have a little bit of a plan, even though it's weak, right? It's not a super concrete plan. And so this score is at 63 out of 100, and so it shows that we're actually in about the top 10% of hooks with that score there already, and it's only 1 sentence. So that's the basic setup, and that's what we did for Hormozi's channel and a whole bunch of other channels. At this point, we've scored about 136,000 video hooks, so we got a pretty good data set. So now that we have Hormozi's entire long-form catalog scored, let's dive in and see what it looks like. So if we look at the 4P scoring model here, and if we say that the maximum score you can achieve is 100 and the minimum is 0, Alex scores on average about a 52 across his entire long-form catalog. Now, that might not sound very good. 52 out of 100 doesn't sound good initially. It actually puts him in the top 15% of all channels and 136,000 videos that we scored. So relative to most channels, it's actually exceptional. Now, some of this comes down to how you decide to score, and our scoring rubric is admittedly pretty picky. What we've graded is that to achieve the maximum score, a plan has to be really concrete, right? So a concrete plan would be, here's the 3 steps, here's what we're gonna do, and then we're gonna do this. That'd be a more explicit, concrete plan. Whereas a more implicit plan might be, in this video, I'm gonna show you how to do this. That's just less objective and less concrete than a more specific plan. I think it also squares with a more subjective spot check. So while Hormozi does clearly teach and practice his 3P or 4P or 5P, depending on where you look, hook structure, you can jump to any number of his videos and you can see where he skips an element. Now, I have no inside knowledge as to why. Maybe his team is testing stuff. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe he has a specific reason for why he drops one element. I have no idea. The more interesting finding is how his scores on the 4P hook formula correlate with views on his channel. So if we look at his scores here, we compare these to views per day, or VPD. So across the axis here at the bottom, we have his hook scores binned. So this bin here would be scores that were a perfect 100. This bin here would be scores that were an 88, and so on down. The number at the top of the bin is the median VPD, or views per day. The reason we use VPD, and the reason it's super important, is that views per day accounts for the amount of time a video has been published. You don't generally want to compare raw total views video to video because obviously a video accumulates more views the longer it's been published. VPD accounts for that. And so what we see here is that his hooks that score a perfect 100 do 1600 VPD as a median. Now you might get super excited and be like, oh my goodness, they scored 100 and it does so many more views. That's true. The sample size here is 6. He only has 6 videos that score a perfect score, so I wouldn't read a ton into that. The next bin down is where he's scoring about an 88 on average, and those are doing 500 views per day. And if you move down here, you can see that there is a decent correlation between higher scoring hooks and views per day. It's a modest correlation, which is interesting. This is not causation. I'm not saying that high hook scores cause higher views. The data just doesn't support that. There's a lot going on with YouTube videos beyond the hook, and a hook only explains some small component of what actually makes a video get views. So another way to look at this is by looking at his channel over time, or longitudinally. And not just because I wanted an excuse to say longitudinal, but because it's actually super interesting. So this chart shows every long form video he's published going back to 2021, which is as far back as the data on his channel goes. Each dot here is a video, and they're ranked here again by VPD, or views per day. So moving up the scale here, he has some outlier high performers. And if you move down here, you know, he has some lower performers. I guess How He Finds Meaning is one of his lower performing videos. And over here you have, you know, How to Get So Rich You Question Make the Meaning of Making Money, which is one of his outliers. And across the x-axis here, obviously this is over time from 2021 through 2026. So if we chart a trend for his video performance, his VPD performance here, you can see it's steadily rising over time, really solid upward growth trend. Now, if we chart his hook scores over time as well, we see kind of the trend we talked about earlier. Now, once again, don't misinterpret this. I'm not saying that hook scores going up caused views to go up. This is correlation, it's not causation. You should not read into this that if I go write high scoring hooks, all of a sudden my videos will do what Alex's videos do. It's not true. Probably won't happen. I think the more important thing to note here is that he's clearly been improving his own hook craft over time. He was relatively low early on. He was in the 40s out of 100 or 50 out of 100. And then he kind of flatlined here for 3 years, right? It seemed like he was producing roughly the same thing for about 3 years. And then in late 2024, he has this pretty significant uptick, and lately he's averaging in the 70s or so. And so that average that we saw earlier of 52 out of 100, that's across his entire catalog going back to 2021. Lately, he's doing a lot better. He's 70 plus. So lately, in the last year or so, he's probably in the top 1 percentile would be my guess. And a shift to educational content would have a natural shift in hook structure. Entertainment content doesn't really have a promise or a pain or a plan. So I think that makes sense. And he's publicized his hook formula and teaches it, and clearly he's practicing what he preaches, and he's doing it more and more over time as he hones that. So let's compare Hormozi with another channel that has an even more dramatic correlation, and that's Dan Martell. So Dan has a much more even sampling across the bins of hook scores here. So again, if we go to videos where he scored a perfect score, we've got 43. If we move down, we've got 84 and then 67. And so we have a much better sample size and distribution of those hook scores. And he has a much more dramatic, pronounced correlation here. So when he scores 88 and above, his VPD is around 800. When he drops the hook score to a 75, his VPD cuts in half. And then when you go down to, below a 75, his VPD is abysmal compared to what he had before. And then if we look at Dan's channel over time, we see a similar trend in views with a fairly dramatic inflection here in about 2023. So he's pretty flat through these early years, and his data goes back quite a bit further. So back to, I think, 2015. He's pretty flat from 2015 through, 2023. And then he has a significant inflection point here as his channel kind of takes off. And if we look at his hook scores over time, again, we see a similar trend, right? He was pretty low here back in 2015, 2016. He's scoring about a 40 out of 100. Again, the yellow dash line is his hook scores. So his hook scores are scoring about a 40 out of 100 here, drops to like a 20 out of 100 in 2022. And then in 2023, he significantly improved his craft. Lately in 2026, he's above 80. So he is is for sure way at the top of the chart for this 4P hook model for scoring consistently there. So as I showed you earlier, you can test this out yourself. So just hit the link in the description and you can drop any hook you want and we'll score it against this exact same model. And they'll tell you where you rank pretty much instantly. You can run it as much as you want, totally free. You can also drop your channel handle in there and we'll score your last 5 videos and tell you how you rank against the 150,000 that we've graded. I think the real question practically for you is, what have you got to lose by trying it? The core of the formula is promise some benefit for the viewer, show some proof you know what you're talking about, and give a brief plan of what you're going to say, and maybe highlight a pain you're going to help them solve. That's not exactly a risky way to talk to people. That's just basic content marketing and being a good neighbor. That's Eugene Schwartz's pyramid of awareness from back in the 60s. But the hook only matters if you nail the title, because you have to get them to click first to watch the hook. So check out this next video on how to write great titles backed by data.